Lovely to see you all. So we can plug that in a moment. We'll just grab a few right now. So, hope you all had a wonderful weekend, nice long weekend. Yes, good. Now we're back. We've got a couple of weeks left. So this term, what we're going to be doing, we're going to be finishing off with sort of metaphysics, and we're sort of approaching into epistemology, and we're really going to see a link between them. We have logic test at the end of the term, and then coming up in term 4, we're just doing ethics, which is going to be lots of fun as well. So today we're just going to talk very briefly about ways that we could, determinism, and then ways that we could debate it as well. Okay, because a number of us are doing this. So there's a couple of arguments I want to present as ways of arguing for that we have free will. So the first question is, this was one of our questions when we talked about determinism. Okay, we said determinism is the idea that you don't have any free will whatsoever, that every action you take is determined by the previous state of the universe. One of the questions we asked is, well, what about moral responsibility? Okay, so for instance, Hitler and Mother Teresa, you could say two opposite sides of the coin, one sort of the epitome of evil, and one, a paragon of sanctity, the epitome of sanctity, of sainthood. So, can we, if Hitler's behaviour is determined, Travis, just lose the earphones then. If his behaviour is determined, can we blame him for it?
No.
And if we think of like someone who commits a crime or robs a bank or kills someone, can we blame them for it?
No.
And we say, well, no, we can't. So can we send them to prison then? Can we send them to prison and punish them for it? Okay, or similarly, we've got Mother Teresa there, someone who does really good things. Should we praise her and say, you're so amazing, like great work on doing that? Should we praise her for great work on all the donating to charity and the giving of yourself? So one answer is yes, that even if we're determined, we should still blame and send to prison, and we should still praise people. Okay, the reason being, when you get praised, you're like, oh, it feels good. And so then you're more likely to act in that way again. You're more likely to, it encourages you to act in a good way. Similarly, going to prison doesn't sound very good. It's a deterrent from committing a crime. If you could rob a bank, all right, and you might get money and get away with it, you might get caught. But if you got caught and you could just say, oh, well, it was determined, well, they'd say, oh yeah, okay, fair enough, you can go about your business. No, getting caught and going to prison is a deterrent. And so when you take into effect all of the causes that dictate your behaviour, well, going to prison, because you could be punished for it, could be one of them. Okay? So there's some interesting points on moral responsibility. Let's have a look at the first argument. This was the second argument we looked at. This was the scientific one, where we said all humans are made of atoms. All movement of atoms is dictated by the laws of the universe. Therefore, everything we do, all movements we make are dictated by the laws of the universe. So this is quite an easy one to dispute, but it does require and depend on some other. Guys, can we close our laptops, please? We don't need them open at the moment. We're just having a bit of a chat here. It does depend on your foundation. So remember, we've talked about both philosophy of mind, and we've talked about determinism. What we're going to see is that they are very linked to one another. So two theories we've sort of proposed to you is materialism and dualism. Okay, so materialism, that matter is the only substance. Everything is made of matter, and that's the only thing that exists. Or dualism, that there's two substances. There's some sort of mind or spirit or soul, and then there's this physical universe, and that the soul controls the body, but is also the body informs the mind about certain things as well, that they interact with one another. So one way to combat it would be to say, well, human beings are more than just matter, that they have some soul. And if you say that, then you've proved premise 1 wrong. Okay? Remember, if this is a valid argument, and so if both premises are true, the conclusion has to be true. So if we agree with both of them, then we have to agree with the conclusion. One way we could disagree is to advocate for dualism. Okay, so we've got materialism now. I've got these birds down the bottom because they can be a way of illustrating those theories. A third one I'm going to propose to you that we're going to talk a bit more about in coming weeks is idealism. Okay? And idealism says there's no physical world. The physical world doesn't exist. Everything is in the mind. That everything physical that exists is generated by the mind. So we've got these competing theories here, don't we? We've got everything is physical, and so every thought you have is just a physical process. That's materialism. We have dualism, that there is this physical world and this sort of spiritual realm, and they interact with one another somehow. Or we've got idealism, which says everything is just an idea. It's just mind. Everything is produced by the mind. And so those little birds there illustrating the difference between them. So that was the first argument, and that's one way you can combat it, is you can reject the materialist premise. You can say, no, human beings are more than matter. What about the second argument we have? This one's a bit harder to combat. We have any action we perform is because we want to do it. No one chooses what they want, and therefore no one chooses what actions they perform. Now, some people throughout our discussions have said, no, I think I can choose what I want. And other people said, you can condition what you want. And I think you can say those words, that you could say, my favourite colour, I want it to be pink. I want to change my favourite colour, or I want to like seaweed. Aiden eats seaweed, I don't like it, I think it's disgusting. I want to like it because it's healthy. I think you could condition the behaviour, but if you're conditioning it, that shows you that it's not a choice. It's something that is determined by the conditioning rather than it being a choice. So this one's quite difficult to combat, but let's compare it to two different arguments that we haven't looked at yet. Both of these are quite interesting. I'm going to make a proposition that every single action you take is selfish. Every single action you take is selfish. There is no such thing as a selfless action. You try and think of a selfless action, and I can tell you why it is selfish. So let's look at some selfless actions here. You donate to charity. Okay, you might think that's a great idea. You're pulling money out of your bank and giving it to charity. How could that be selfish? How could that be selfish? Hey?
It's to make the person who donates feel good about themselves because other people will praise them for it.
Spot on. Yeah, could be they're looking for praise for it. Could be they just get a positive feeling inside them. Okay, they're pursuing something for themselves. All right. What about someone that drives an electric car, trying to save the planet, doing a good thing to save the planet?
It would be the same thing.
Exactly the same thing. Like they could be praised for their virtuous action. Could be they get a good feeling about doing the right thing, caring for the planet. What about, like this happens to me, I have to get up in the night to put the dummy in the baby's mouth because it's crying. Like I could just roll over and sort of go back to sleep and ignore it. How might that be selfish of me to get up?
Going to sleep with the baby crying is a lot more difficult than if you quiet it down.
I'm invested in my sleep, I want to sleep, so therefore I want the baby to sleep. All right. What about this then? The soldier, this is maybe the most virtuous action you can think of. A grenade gets thrown into the trench. It's like there's 4 people around, it's going to blow them up, and one of the soldiers jumps on it. So sacrificing himself to save his friends. Surely that's the ultimate act of virtue. How is that selfish? Well, why is he doing it? Because he wants to save his friends. He's doing it for himself. Again, you could say it's about praise and that kind of thing. So I wonder if this, what we've committed here, okay, this sort of argument, we're saying there's no such thing as a selfless act, that everything is selfish, is a fallacy of equivocation. Okay, if we think of equivocation, this is a fallacy that we've learnt about. Socrates is Greek. Greek is a language, therefore Socrates is a language. We're using one word with 2 meanings. So this is a valid syllogism, or it can be put as a valid syllogism, but the error occurs because the term is ambiguous. It has 2 meanings. So I wonder if, yes, of course, we have to agree with the conclusion of the previous one because it uses selfish in a way that we're not familiar with. It uses selfish, like if we think of selfish, we think of acting in one's self-interest at the expense of others. We think you don't care about anyone else, you're just doing it for yourself. Okay, but if you broaden that definition of selfish so wide that it includes any action that you take, that's what they're saying. A selfish action is any action that you take. Well, of course it is, because any action taken is taken by the self. So by definition, it's selfish. Okay, you make a similar argument about happiness, that every action that you take is in the pursuit of happiness. Okay, so again, why would you revise for a test? You're probably sitting there revising, you're not particularly enjoying the revision. But how could it be that this is all in the pursuit of happiness?
You'll be happy if you succeed on the test.
You want to get a good result in the test, and so you're investing in happiness in the future. All right? What about if you rob a bank? You're robbing a bank to get some money. You think money's going to make you happy. You donate to charity, you're chasing those happy feelings or praise you might receive from it. Even if you're doing alcohol and drugs, or even committing suicide, okay? So alcohol and drugs in the pursuit of something good. Suicide, like if you think of why does someone commit suicide, it's like life is so horrible, I want to escape what is horrible in pursuit of what is good. This is so horrible, I need to exit this in pursuit of something better. So even in that instance, it's a pursuit of a perceived happiness, we should say, we should clarify. So I wonder if this is some sort of equivocation fallacy. Like if we think back, when we say pursuit of things that make us happy, we could look at all of these things and we can make them appear to be some pursuit of happiness. In the same way, we can look at all of these things and make them appear to be selfish. So I wonder, with this argument then, so we have there is no selfless action because every action is taken by the self. So this is a hard bunch of words to process. There is no want that is not wanted because all wants are wanted. So I wonder if this syllogism, if this argument here, what does want mean? Is it throwing the net of want too wide? Okay, so that might be a way that we can debate this one. All right, so that's a tricky argument. A few people have selected that one, so we can talk about that with you if you have any more questions. How about this? John Locke, he's a philosopher, again, we'll encounter in coming weeks. He says, a man wakes up in a locked room and decides to stay where he is, not realizing the door to the room is locked. The man thinks that he has made a free decision, but in reality he has no choice. All right, so that's talking about free will as an illusion. Obviously, it feels like we have free will, but determinism says, yeah, of course it feels like that, but you don't. You're like this man locked in the room. That's a good way to describe it. Christopher Hitchens, so another philosopher, literary genius, many would say, says we are determined to think we have free will. So a clever sort of play on words there. We're determined to believe we have free will. What about this deer, right? There's a deer in a cage, okay? And so I'm going to say the cage is 10 meters square. And I ask the question, is the deer in a cage? Yes, of course it is. What if it's a big cage, like, did you know, like deer, apparently they only live in a circle with a radius of 5 kilometers. Okay, so if you think of a circle and it's got a radius of 5 kilometers, the deer basically just wander around in this area. All right? So now we've got a cage that is just beyond the radius of which the deer would live. Is it in a cage? Yeah. What about if we think of Australia and there's lots of deer in Australia? If we put a big fence the whole way around Australia, is the deer still in a cage?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So we can ask the same question about ourselves, is what cages are we in? In a way, you're in a cage in this room at the moment. You might think, well, I'm sort of locked in South Australia, or I'm limited in Mount Gambier by how far I can travel. I can't get off the planet, so you're in the cage, that's the planet. So there are all these sort of cages that we're in. That's an interesting way of thinking about determinism. So what can we say finally about determinism? It feels like we have free will, doesn't it? It feels like I can make choices. But there's some good arguments for determinism. Okay, there's some convincing arguments. Could be free will is an illusion, but why does the illusion exist? Okay, let's spend about 10 minutes talking about these questions amongst one another, and then we can move on to our new issues analysis that we're doing on metaphysics. We'll spend the rest of the lesson doing that.